Snake Historian, thank you for the 5. Hey Luke, this came out today, but IGN got rights to another Outer Worlds exclusive look. Oh, really? Did they fix the screen tearing? Probably not, right? No, they probably did.
The Outer Worlds 2 seems to be expanding in so many directions, and as part of our IGN First exclusive, we previously covered the reworked RPG elements that'll give players deeper and more varied gameplay options. But now, we're here to talk about worlds, the open zones and regions across the different planets and moons that make up your journey in the Outer Worlds 2. This time around, they're noticeably bigger, but bigger doesn't always mean better. So I talked with art director Daniel Alpert and game director Brandon Adler about how they're rewarding exploration, creating dense environments, and thinking about level design this time around. And we dig into the trenches of Golden Ridge for a first look at one of the new regions you'll explore and what that could tell us about the open zones to come.
Okay. Alpha build footage.
We're definitely going more expansive than the first game. First game, we were very confined to like smaller hubs, overlands areas. Now we're utilizing Unreal Engine 5. We can have way more expansive worlds. From point A to point B is a much larger territory that we can cover. And in between those areas, we have lots of like little POIs and tinies that we can explore.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on that, one of the very first things that we were targeting when we started the Outer Worlds 2 was to make these big, large, expansive areas. Really, it's what players kind of told us that they wanted the most out of the Outer Worlds 2, right? So, working with Daniel and the other directors, we sat down and we came up with a plan to how are we going to go do that, right? So we made sure that with big open sight lines, and that we spent a lot of time and effort on making really cool looking POIs, point of interest, at distance to really kind of draw people and really also maybe kind of bring them off the beaten path a little bit. So like when they're heading over there, we made sure that like as you're rounding corners or you're doing things like that, you see like little pops of interest. And so, being able to like kind of draw the player in those different directions. But another element
This is something that a lot of open world games are not great at. It's what honestly Breath of the Wild was phenomenal at. Outer Worlds, there was actually a GDC talk where they talked about this. Specifically, what was interesting in Breath of the Wild, there's a really interesting thing that they do where they talked openly about this, but at GDC they outlined how they target specific shapes because they found players' vision was tied to different shapes and tended to go towards different shapes differently. So they'll have different, let me just, find a color. They have things over here that are pulling your attention, things like this that are pulling your attention. They have these big triangles that pull your attention, and people's vision tends to float towards the center as their primary objective. And then you can even use these with multiple other points of interest that kind of cluster POIs in your view. So as you're looking through this stuff, you might spot this tower over here, you might spot this tower down here, and then you spot some other POIs like this. I can't tell if it's a tower or what that is, but either way, it's pulling my attention. And so just there, like your eyes kind of did a scoop down here, and then they float over here. You see another point of interest here. Ooh, what's that weird tower thing? That's interesting. And then you kind of loop back down. You see, a river. Oh, this wall. And they just want your eyes to kind of glide across the image, spotting new things that you could explore. It's a very simple concept where you basically just want the player to be able to scan with their eyes across the map and see a bunch of stuff that interests them. And in Breath of the Wild, specifically they have the ability to pull out your whatever binocular scanner thing and actually put a marker on these POIs so that you can go back and find them later. Even though you saw them from a vantage point, and when you're running around down here, you wouldn't be able to see some of these POIs, but you'll still have it marked on your map. So like there's lots of different techniques for this, but what's interesting in Outer Worlds 2, they're talking about trying to do the same thing where they have, buildings off in the distance. You see that, you go, oh, I want to go to there. I want to see what is over there. And from these bigger vantage points, like they showed back here, they want you to be able to scan the environment and see things that are interesting. For this though, I don't think it's in the same vein and it's quite on the same level as Breath of the Wild because as you can see, there's just a difference in clarity and detail. Like this is a building that seems interesting to me. I'm like, ooh, maybe I go there. And then I look over here and these lines are kind of drifting off this way. So you are kind of led to look over here. So maybe that's a POI, but there's not really much else that captivates you. Maybe this building down here that you're about to run into, but there's not a whole lot that pulls your attention. And I think it's just because there's not a lot of contrast in the image, and the dust and cloud kind of flattens it out a little bit. But again, it's alpha, it could change, but it does go to show you the difference between like the little pops of color, the contrast of the building over the lighter background, the fact in this that they have the little blue light pillars that contrast against the rock and the grass very, very clearly. Like there's a reason why the color on the towers is not green. There's a reason. It's because the blue contrasts better with the green grass in the background, so you can see it easier. So there's just all these little bitty tips and tricks, all these little tricks that they use to pull your attention and inspire you to go and find what's over there. And it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of develops, because they definitely are trying to do that. It's tougher with smaller environments though, because you see something that's interesting and then you walk over there within 30 seconds, you know?
Just cool, fun stuff to go do, nice loot to go find, cool stories to go unfold.
Golden Ridge is an area on the moon of Dorado within the Arcadia system that's owned by the Protectorate faction. It is rich with resources, but not teeming with life. So the water is poisonous. It's desert-like, but it has this like kind of arid appearance. But as I said, it's really rich with resources, and this has caused factions to fight over this landscape.
Yeah, I mean, the resource itself, Zeranium, is new to the Outer Worlds 2 and what that means, but it's the thing that powers all of Protectorate society. All the automechanicals and their major machines kind of run off of this stuff, which is one of the major reasons that everybody's kind of fighting over this. So that's kind of Golden Ridge's thing. Right, so you're going to get a lot of the same types of things, that we had in the first game, right? So you're going to have cool side quests, interesting characters to kind of go and meet and do all of that stuff. But we also made sure we added in a lot of cool little things for players to go find that are little collectible type things. We have like these toss ball cards. We had a few of them in the first game. We've added a ton of those things. You can collect them. You get cool bonuses for having that stuff. And again, another thing that was really, really important to us early on is making sure that we are telling cool, fun stories as well. Like that's part of the reward is you go into these areas and you get to learn about like the different NPCs that were inhabiting these areas, the different different characters you're just going to kind of go and meet throughout this whole thing. So that was another big thing, that there's not just a material reward, but it's a cool, fun story reward that just really enhances the whole process. One of the...
I like that. I like stories as rewards. Collectibles are not that exciting to me. I'm just like, more random crap you got to go search for. But hearing that they're tied to stories and little narrative elements, I'm okay. That's interesting.
The things that we do before we get into any area is we just have deep conversations about the overall story, not only just with the overall story itself, but the factions and kind of what they were doing, what's important to them. Why was anybody in Golden Ridge? And that kind of really sets the stage when we go to the artist and we're like, okay, there was a fight here. Here's what they were fighting over. Here's kind of why this ended up in the way that it is. We want the trench lines here, maybe for gameplay reasons, but here's why it makes sense story-wise. And then what usually happens at that point is the pods, mixtures of area designers, narrative designers, environment artists, they kind of get together and really kind of discuss, okay, well, like, here's the broad level idea. How do we get to, like, the core idea of, like, what is in here, the cool, fun little stories that we can tell with that backdrop. That's usually how we kind of go through our areas and kind of set that stuff up.
We intentionally design each of our worlds to feel different from each other. It's a unique landscape every time you land on a new moon or...
Which I do think is crucial. It's helpful to have different looks. I will say that the purple, the purple glowing gems is still very much a thing here. We're coming out of that phase, through the early 2020s and late 2010s. It seemed like every game, everything was just about giant glowing purple stuff. And I think Suicide Squad kind of put a nail in that a little bit. Now it's rarer, but for a while it was everywhere, dude. Like every game had giant glowing purple gems and jewels and zits and stuff. It's really stupid, but this does look good. And I mean, I will say, you can tell this is an Unreal Engine 5 game. The amount of geometry on screen at any given time is insane. It's crazy. Probably means it's gonna run like ass, but it looks good at least.
New area. So it's
Yeah, to be clear, they look decorative. Yeah, I'm not saying that you can pop these like Suicide Squad. If you want to pop purple zits, you play Suicide Squad. That's what you do.
shouldn't be like you come here and it's like, oh, it's a little bit more of the same. No, this is completely different from the last moonscape you just came from, and the next one you're going to be visiting is completely different as well.
That said, like one thing I think that is going to really pop to people when they first get in there, and it would be super noticeable, is we have these big open areas, and Golden Ridge may be like the most open out of all of them. I mean, it's huge and it's vast, and it kind of gives you a cool feeling of like, man, this is a world I can go and explore. And you can see again all of the nooks and crannies everywhere, lots of cool things off in the distance to just like, yeah, I'm gonna go see that thing. I think that's going to show up almost immediately. I think, I won't get into what happens at the beginning of Golden Ridge, but there's a big state change in the area that where you first get over there, it's going to kind of blow people away, and it's going to make them, again.
I'm guessing it's an explosion based on what I'm seeing and the fact he said it blows people away.
Really want to go and investigate what's happening and all of that stuff. And you see that throughout a lot of our areas as well. We try to do those types of things, let the players see big events that are happening pretty early to get them kind of hooked into the area.
One of the interiors we have Xyranium Labs is this big open mining facility. So you kind of get tunneled in through an elevator and you open up, and all of a sudden it's like a huge kind of environment, but within a confined space. We're able to kind of get that feeling of almost epicness, but in a way that is still very explorable. Player doesn't get lost in there. They can find their way and discover like little goodies along the ways.
Well, again, I think a lot of what we're doing.
I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with anything, but I'm just fascinated by it. Again, IGN's production value just continues to blow me away. It really is amazing. Watch, like, just as we go frame to frame, just like watch the side of the couch. Okay, frame to frame. You see this craziness, all that noise. Now that I pointed it out, you're not going to be able to see anything but that, okay? Because it's here on the side of the couch, it's on the hoodie, it's back in here, it's on the side here by his shoulder. What I think is happening, because it's not on this camera. It's not on this camera, but
Again, I think a lot of
it is all over. You see how noisy that is? Watch, all over the frame. It's just so noisy all over the place, and it looks so bad. You know what this is? It's not bitrate. No. You want to know why? And then I'm just saying this as somebody that like has messed with my camera setup enough where I know this. Notice how in the background you have the other buildings, and they're largely very sharp. Even this thing that's like this skyscraper that's next to them, that is 1,000 feet away, 2,000 feet away, however far away this skyscraper is. That out the window is still very, very sharp. The lines are still very sharp, okay? Same with the reflection of the other building and all that. They're filming this on like, I'm guessing, a lens that has it at like f20, f24 or whatever. And then when you swap to the other camera, like this one that doesn't have the noise issue, you see how nice and soft the bokeh is in the background and all that. That's because this is probably shot on like an f2.4 and f4, something like that. All that means is that the aperture of the camera lens, it's wider, letting in more light, which softens out the background better. But it also means that more light is getting into the sensor. When you go and you have it on a really high f-stop value, it means that the aperture is really tiny. Not much light is being let in at all. And you can see they have lights. These are lights they have shining on these two guys in the same room. And it still has that problem. And it's because they're shining the light, but so little light is actually getting into the sensor. They're having to crank the ISO up to make it look half decent. So you get this noise distortion bouncing and jittering all over the frame, and it looks terrible. I think that's what's happening. I'm driven crazy by it. It's just every time we watch anything with IGN, there's always technical problems, dude.
But in true Obsidian game style, we allow players to go everywhere and kind of experience whatever they want. So, when we go in there, we work with the environment artists and the audio designers to really draw the player around, either through visual markers or interesting things that they're kind of hearing. And so that's really what we use to kind of softly pull the player through areas. But again, we know where we want the players to go, so we put the most interesting elements in the spaces that we want them to kind of walk through.
Guys, You have the plant face in focus. The game director's not. What are we doing? This is your job. You have 19 million subscribers. Sorry, 18.9. What are we doing? It's amazing to me, man. It's amazing to me.
And walk towards.
We have this like decorative Art Nouveau touch kind of over everything, but we also kind of ground our technological reality as if it was still constructed in the early 20th century. With this, you know, we're able to...
God, dude, just look at the sheer amount of rubble, like geometric rubble all over the frame. That's how you know this is an Unreal Engine 5 game, because it's just, they're using nanite to the max.
Like kind of pull from areas of like the late Old West to almost World War I-esque items and imbue the areas with like these like little touches. If the player kind of goes through Dorado, they'll notice like a trench warfare line that is reminiscent of World War I. And if
That's what it made me think of, like actual trenches and stuff. Way too clean to be like actual warfare trenches, but maybe they just built them.
they go like a little further into like a town, they'll still kind of have that frontier colony vibe that we wanted to hit, not just with game 1, but also push further with game 2.
I mean, I think a cool thing with the setting in general is everything is very analog.
I swear to God. What's the over under on them cutting to a close up and it's out of focus again? I don't know. Isn't it sad that this is what we're talking about? I think the game looks solid. Don't get me wrong. It's just this stuff is distracting, IGN. For the love of God, I can't.
Everything is very... clunky is not the right word, but everything has like meat to it. You know, things are not sleek and small. And I think that's really cool when you go through the world. You see that. You see lots of huge wires and pipes that come in and out of things that kind of show almost the internals of like how these things work. I think it's a very interesting thing, and we've kind of doubled down on that. And you can see that in a lot of our areas as well.
Thank God. Yeah, I think they've taken their time with it. I'm also just in awe that they are putting this out. Like, they just put out Avowed. And they're putting this out. Like, it's amazing how quickly they're pumping through these games. It really is crazy. Like, one studio pumping out 2 pretty solid games within like 9 months, 12 months of each other. It's wild. It makes me wonder if they're clearing development space for another project. Maybe. No, realistically, they're just going to do another Avowed sequel that's already being rumored and stuff. But yeah, I think it's really, really impressive that they're getting through these so quickly. But it's also, again, one of the advantages of Unreal Engine is that apparently it allows you to work really, really quickly. Like, say what you will about it, you don't have to love the Unreal Engine because it makes things run like crap, and you know there's all sorts of problems. But it does seem to, at the very least, allow teams to work very fast. You know.
Well, I'll tell you a couple quick advantages of using Unreal Engine 5. One, we had limitations before with how many people can work within a certain area at a time. That's been way more freeform in how we are able to utilize the engine. So multiple people, designers, artists can be working that same area at one time without having to collaborate on top of each other. But the greatest advantage...
Yeah, something just as simple as that, having the cloud tools so that you can work on one part of the map at the same time instead of having to have things isolated off. That's a huge deal. It wasn't a given for like a long time. It used to be that, oh no, you have somebody that builds the assets and then one person is like the czar of this POI, and that's all they do is they just build out this POI. They pull assets over here, they do this, and then they are done. They hand it off to the lighting guy and he goes in and does his stuff. And now with these new engines and the new developments they've had with it, you can have teams working even remotely that do stuff all together, you know, even in totally different countries on the other side of the planet. Like for AC Shadows, the team that was doing all the water stuff for that game is in Singapore, while the core team is in Quebec, literally the opposite side of the planet. But they were able to work on the same game, same environments at the same time, because like the new tech is so crazy. So we do live in the future, even if games are running kind of poorly.
Has been just the global illumination, real-time lighting, just being able to see and iterate on areas really fast has been just a game changer. Being able to quickly iterate.
And you can't really argue with it because they've, like you guys said, they put out what, like 4 or 5 games in 6 years. They just pump through these games, not in a bad way. Like they've had some bangers like Pentiment. which had all sorts of 10 out of 10 reviews and is also very good if you're interested in like very narrative focused games. But they work very, very fast. And, you know, they're not pushing for like the AAA massive scale games. They're not trying to make something that is, you know, on the level of like a Starfield or Elder Scrolls 6 or anything. But what they are trying to do, they seem to do really solidly. Like, you know, Avowed is a great example of just a solid like a AA scale game. I wouldn't pay $70 for Avowed, but for like 50, 60, yeah, I'd consider it. Game Pass, no brainer. Go check it out. Give it a shot, you know.
Great is like just tantamount to like exploring creativity in a game like, especially like the Outer Worlds. If something just doesn't feel right, it's not working right, we can quickly prototype a change and see it in real time and play with it, and then get feedback from our game directors, our design directors, and we just run with it.
Daniel and Brandon are just a few of the folks who are making The Outer Worlds 2, and in the coming weeks, we'll have conversations about the retuned combat and revamped flaws system. And look out for our talk with Fallout OG and creative director Leonard Boyarsky about the evolution of RPGs and much more. If you missed our deep dive on what's new with character builds, be sure to check that out too. It's all part of our exclusive coverage on Obsidian's next big game, so for more on The Outer Worlds 2, stick with IGN.
Yeah, I think the game looks really solid. It looks like they are literally improving across the board on everything the first game did. The one thing I've not been sold on is the companions and the writing. That's been one thing I've not been sold on. The original Outer Worlds trailer is the original one that showed off a lot of the characters. Like, you remember the one where the characters were just talking straight to the camera? Maybe was it the announcement trailer? Yeah.
It's bad and worse. But you have to choose. And you have to choose now.
You remember this? The first game, they really took a focus on like the companions and like the stories and the interactions between companions and the player. And with this second game, it seems like that is not anywhere near as high as a priority, because they just haven't really tackled it much. And the one companion we did see in that last gameplay little snippet, like even that, they just do a splash screen of a bunch of different characters and stuff. It's very character driven. Whereas this game seems to be focused much more on gameplay, which is not a bad thing, because the gameplay was one thing people were frustrated by in the original. But yeah, the companions I think also will tell a lot, because people still talk about some of the companions from Outer Worlds. So I think it goes a long way. But yeah, the one companion we saw was like really... Can we calm down? Can we calm down a little bit? Like, we're kind of being a lot right now. He took my thing. Red